Next topic is how to measure inflation. Whatever inflation we usually say, how to measure it? What are the indices to measure inflation in the economy? So it depends at what level you are measuring. Suppose a farmer is there or a small producer is there. So in case of agriculture commodities, it is the farmer who is responsible. In case of other commodities, it is the producer. So now they have to sell. So they will sell either in mandi, farmer will sell in APMC mandi, or producer will sell in wholesale market. And once it goes through this wholesale market, finally it will be being sold to retailer or the final customer, retailer shop or the customer. So at this farmer or producer, at the level of this farmer or producer, no transportation has taken place. So it means there is no inclusion of, or there is no impact of petrol prices, or there is no impact of diesel prices. There is no middleman attached here. So the impact of increase in the fees, commission, or the prices of all these commodities, transportation cost and all, has not been considered if you are measuring inflation at this level. And how to measure? We already seen. This is January 2015, for example, and this is January 2016. A group of commodities you have prioritized, the group of same quantities you have to prioritize in 2016. Just compare or just find out the difference between the prices of these commodities. That is how you can measure inflation. But whenever you are comparing the prices of these commodities, at what level you are measuring the prices? The farmer level, or at the wholesale level, or at the retail or customer level? Because it is possible. Suppose you are making this pen. At this producer level, the price of this pen in January 2015, and suppose measuring in January 2016, of the price of this pen is 15 rupees. In January 2016 also it is 15 rupees. Then you have to do the transportation, middlemen will be attached and all these things, they also will charge some commission. Suppose at wholesale market the price becomes 20 rupees, and in this case the price becomes 22 rupees. And suppose once it crosses the wholesale market, there will be a chain of middlemen attached, 5 or 6, the value chain is for 5 or 6 persons. Then afterwards when it reaches the retail shop or the final customer, suppose the price becomes 30, and here the price, suppose the middlemen increased their commission in 2016, from 1st January 2016, suppose they increase the commission, and now it becomes 40. So at this producer level the price is same, but at this customer or consumer level the price has increased drastically. At this wholesale market also the price has increased. So if you are measuring inflation at this level, the index that you use is known as CPI, Consumer Price Index, because you are accounting the prices of commodities at this level. If you are measuring the index inflation at this level, it is known as WPI, because you are considering the prices of commodities at wholesale market. In this case you are accounting the prices of the commodities at customer level market or the final consumption based market. And if you are measuring the prices at this level, this is known as PPI, Producer Price Index. But in India there is a problem, we don't have any PPI or much working PPI. The reason is data collection. At wholesale market you have well established market, so you can compare the prices of the same commodities in 2015 and 2016, because somebody is maintaining the data, this wholesaler is maintaining the data in his or her records. So you can get the values of these commodities, the prices of these commodities in 15 also, 16 also. You will do the difference between these things, and finally you can come up with the inflation. But in case of these producers, we have farmers, fragmented farmers, we have the agricultural land is highly fragmented, so that will be one problem. Then we have small scale industries, we have MSMEs, so they don't keep any data, they don't maintain any data. So because data collection is a problem, that is why we don't have producer price index. But otherwise, if you actually want to see the value of inflation, if you actually want to see the increase in the prices of the commodities, this PPI is the best index. Earlier, RBI was framing the policies or inflation related policies on the basis of WPI. But after the recommendations of Urjit Patel committee, now CPI is the nodal index or the nominal anchor index. So at these three levels, this is what the distinction between how to measure. These are the different indices. So first we will discuss WPI or wholesale price index. So WPI is nothing but it is based in each and every type of index. It is same. How many commodities you consume, you have to prioritize these commodities, and then you are going to compare the price of these commodities in 2 consecutive years, and whatever is the difference is known as inflation, or that particular inflation based on WPI. So in case of WPI, it is dependent on the selected commodities. Selected commodities means only the 676 items. You are not considering all these commodities that we consume. Selected commodities from selected market. It's not like you are taking the samples of price from each and every market of India. You are only taking the samples from selected market. This is roughly equal to 5400. And selected commodities means you are only counting 676 commodities to calculate the value of inflation. And but there is again a problem. Let's suppose you are consuming milk, you are consuming egg, you are consuming few clothes, so the unit of measurement is different. So how you will calculate it? So whatever commodities that you are consuming in whatever units, you have to convert all these things into a common unit. And once that figure will come, you will say this equals to 100. So suppose you are saying that in 2010 you are consuming all these commodities in different units. By converting these different units, you have calculated that 100 was the value of WPI in 2010. Similarly, in 2011 you are going to consume all these things. So whatever different commodities in different units are you are consuming, and then convert it into this single value, maybe it becomes 102. So 102 minus 100 upon 100 into 100 is known as inflation. It means 2% inflation is there in the economy. This is how you can measure. This is known as point to point method. We'll discuss later on. So in case of WPI, you calculate or you take into account the prices of selected commodities from selected market, and the base year, the year from which you are calculating is, it is 2004-2005. But how you have decided 676 commodities? It is based on some table. In that table you have classified the items into 3 groups. First one is primary articles, the second one is fuel, and the third one is manufactured items. The number of items, we consider total 676, so total is 676, and to this 676 you have to give some weightage, percentage, because if you are consuming this pen and you are consuming milk also, but you cannot give same weightage to milk as well as this pen, because maybe suppose you are consuming this pen once in a week, but you are consuming milk every day or maybe twice a day. So number of items is 102, it is 19, it is 555, but the weightage to these 102 items is just 20%. To these 19 items the weightage is 15%. and weightage to manufacture this 555 items is 65%. How you are giving this weightage? The weightage you are giving depending on the expenditure. It means if one family is there who is consuming this 676 items, their expenditure on this 102 rupees, 102 commodities is 20%. Their expenditure on these 19 items or commodities is 15%, and their expenditure on this 555 items is 65%. So this weightage is being decided on the basis of expenditure. This you have to remember, because sometimes in the exam the examiner can ask how the weightage is being decided. So this number of items is being decided by CSO. They have to prioritize the list, whatever the list, the top 676 items they have considered. And how the CSO is deciding the weightage? They are deciding the weightage on the basis of the expenditure done by the family. So if suppose tomorrow the expenditure of family on these 1 or 2 items becomes 25%, so in that case it will be 25. Maybe that is going to decrease the weightage of fuel or the manufactured items. So this is what we have in WPI. Again, to calculate inflation from WPI or the measurement of inflation from WPI, it can be done by two ways. First one is point to point method. Point to point method says inflation, for example, in the month of April 2016 will be equal to the value of WPI in April 2016 minus value of WPI in April 2015 upon value of WPI in April 2015 into 100. It is very much similar how you calculate the profit percentage or the loss percentage. Profit percentage equals to profit selling price minus cost price upon cost price into 100, because cost price is the base. Similarly, inflation in April 2016 equals to WPI in April 2016. Suppose the value is 160 and the value of WPI in April 2015 was 150. So 160 minus 150 upon 150 into 100, that will be the value of inflation in the month of April 2016. So in the newspaper, this point to point method is being used. Whatever in the newspaper it comes, the inflation is 4%, 4.5%. So that we are calculating using points to point method. The second method is 52 week or 12-month average. This is the average one. It means inflation in April 2016 equals to inflation in March 2016 plus in Feb 2016 plus in January 2016 plus this is just 12 months upon 12. So whatever was the average of inflation of last 12 months will be the inflation of next year. But in India we don't use this 52 week or 12-month average method, but we use this points to point method. So we measure or we compare the price of commodities of this month with the same commodities of the prices of the same commodities during last year. Then we have, after this WPI, the next index that we have is CPI, that is known as Consumer Price Index. I missed one point in WPI, that WPI does not include services, it includes only goods. WPI does not consider services. It means that 676 items that we discussed does not include even a single service. But in any economy there is a percentage of agriculture, then there is a percentage of manufacturing, and then there is a percentage of service sector. Can you tell me the rough weightage or the percentage to GDP? Tell me the percentage of GDP given by agriculture, given by manufacturing, given by services sector. So in case of agriculture, after the revised GDP calculation, the agriculture is 18 to 19%. The services, in case of this services sector, it is 52 to 53%, and the rest roughly 30% is by manufacturing. So the sector which is contributing 50 to 53%, increase or decrease in prices of this sector you are not considering under inflation. So that is a bad thing. It means that cannot show you the true picture of inflation. That is why in 2014, on the recommendations of Urjit Patel, RBI said from now onwards we will not consider the value of WPI while framing the policies related to inflation. So they shifted from WPI to CPI, because CPI includes goods as well as services. So in case of CPI, again all these things, the method of calculation and all this thing is simple. Just like in case of CPI, we can have different types of audience. We can have CPI industrial worker, a worker which is working in industries. Then we have urban non-manual employee, the worker, a blue collar job, such kind of people. We have people who are working in MNCs, industrial worker, manufactured worker. So if you are comparing the prices which this industrial worker is paying, which this urban non-manual employee, CPI we have agriculture labor, CPI we have rural labor. So if this is the audience, if you are taking the value, the samples from industrial worker, it is known as CPI industrial worker. If the consumer is from this industrial worker, it is known as CPI IW. If the consumer is urban non-manual employee, such CPI is known as CPI urban non-manual employees. Then if you are calculating for agriculture labor or rural labor, so these indices are very old, still they are continuing, but they are very old. So they decided that a new indices of CPI will come, and in 2010 onwards, on the recommendations of Abhijit Sen committee, they came up with CPI rural. So for all the rural areas, they are consuming something, so the prices which they are paying. So if you are comparing the prices which are being paid by rural folks for maybe 2015 and then 2016, and then you are comparing, that is known as CPI rural. Similarly, we have CPI urban and we have CPI combined or all India. Also we calculate CPI core. So all these are the different types of CPI indices of CPI. But what is the percentage weightage? Just like we discussed, we have 676 items in that case. Similarly, we have to consider the weightage of different items or commodities in this new indices, which is relevant from exam perspective, and the base year is changed from 2010 to 2012. Base year changed from 2010 to 12 means what? Means what they assume? They assume, suppose 2010 you were assuming all these items and different prices, measuring unit is different and all. So they combined all this thing, averaging out and all. Whatever the figure came, that figure they assume is equal to 100. The next year, suppose this is 2010. The next year they thought in 2011, whatever the value came, whatever the actual, they convert using the same formula, and suppose they said it becomes 104. The very next year it becomes 106, 110, 150, whatever the thing is. But this is what the relevance of the base year. You are comparing these future years with respect to some particular base year. So in case of this new indices of CPI, the base year changed from 2010 to 2012. Percentage of rural, percentage of urban, percentage of combined. So first we have food, beverages and tobacco. then we have fuel and power, then clothing, footwear and bedding also. Then we have housing, and at last we have miscellaneous. You don't have to cram all these figures, but you just have to cram these two figures. This is the weightage given to all these commodities in CPI rural, so or CPI urban or CPI combined. Here we have is it is 60%, it is 37%, and combined we have is 50%. Because the percentage of population living in urban areas is less and the population which is living in rural areas is more, that is why the average is less. Then in this is what we have in case of this fuel and power, the percentage is, this is 10%, this is 8%, and this is 9%. In case of clothing, footwear and bedding, the percentage is 5%, then we have 4%, and finally it is 5%. In case of housing, the percentage in rural areas is 0%. In this case it is 22%, and finally we have is 10%, and whatever the difference, both all are in 20s, this is also in 20s, some values in 20s, 25, 28, 27, whatever the difference is. When I am saying it is 0% means what? It means CSO assume that the expenditure on housing done by the rural areas is 0%, or we can say as per the sample survey which CSO got, under that sample survey the expenditure done in rural areas on housing is 0 rupees. That is why they gave a weightage of 0% to this. In rural areas they gave a 0% weightage to this housing of or house commodities like housing. So this is what you just have to cram these two values. The weightage of food in combined is 50% and the weightage of housing in combined is 0%. Then we have few other indices, small indices like PPI, producer price index. If you are calculating at the producers level, that is known as producers price index. Similarly we have service price index. If you are calculating, if you are comparing the prices of services in India, in that case you will get the service price index. And the last one is relevant, that is GDP deflator. GDP deflator we are going to cover in microeconomics. Under that, when we are going to discuss the nominal GDP and versus the real GDP. So real GDP actually it equals to nominal GDP upon GDP deflator. So this is known as GDP deflator being calculated by CSO, but the details we are going to discuss in that microeconomics GDP calculation, because in that chapter only we are going to discuss the relationship between real and nominal, factor cost, market price and all these things. So these are the indices. This is how you can measure the inflation. In the next lecture we are going to discuss the impact of inflation. So there can be some positive impact and there can be some negative impact of inflation. So these topics we are going to discuss in the next class. Thanks a lot.